Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about really the only thing on anybody's minds right now, and that's the shooting in Orlando, Florida, on Monday morning. You raise, before we get into some of the other stuff we're talking about, you raise an interesting point, and I think that we fundamentally disagree on not necessarily what the solutions are to this kind of problem, but to the what we can actually address. Because mentioning that you think that it relates back to we have to figure out some way how to address the psyche, the intention of the person, the motivations of someone that wants to commit acts like this, and not just, and I take your point to mean not just terroristic attacks, but any sort of violence that someone wants to perpetrate on a mass scale. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, the thing that I wrote that's going to be on the website, short, hopefully, and I didn't want to. Did you almost have a heart attack when I emailed you last night?
Oh yeah, I fell right off. I couldn't sleep all night.
That I actually wrote something. Because the point that I made, and I think it makes the most sense to me, is that when we're talking about murderous violence, especially, and really any violence, but particularly murder, it requires an intent to murder, and it requires the act of murder. And if you don't have both of those things, you don't have a murder. The way that we conceive it in this country. In my view, there is no way to purge the intent to kill from the human psyche whatsoever. We've been killing each other for as long as human history is recorded, and as we have progressed through our evolution as a species, we have found more and more ways to kill each other, more devious and elaborate and destructive ways. That impulse to kill, that impulse to do violence, is not something I think that we will ever be able to address in such a way as to make us just naturally safe beings to be around. The act of murder, on the other hand, is something that we have consistently addressed for years and years. We do it through criminal law enforcement, through prisons, through sort of a retribution through the death penalty. They're all manner of things that we've tried to do to kind of punish people for committing these sorts of crimes. But when it comes to gun violence, the one thing that the left has demanded and the right has resisted, fairly or not on either side, is to address the gun itself, the instrumentality by which people commit gun violence. And I think that at least is a place to start. Now, before I'm not going to go off onto a Second Amendment argument here, because the Second Amendment issue, as I've said on the show many, many times, is settled. We have a Supreme Court case that guarantees an individual's right to keep and bear arms in this country. That's just how it is. That's it. We're going to have private gun ownership in this country for as long as the Supreme Court has that opinion. But so we have to accept the fact, the reality, that gun ownership and gun culture is going to be something that we have to live with, just the same way that we live with automobiles and airplanes, dangerous construction equipment, things that when used improperly are dangerous to people. The way that we've addressed those other sorts of things has been through investment, through technology, through research, through making them safer. And I use in my piece, I use the analogy of the automobile, that those were death traps when they were first invented. And you can see the road fatalities with early cars in the 20s and 30s and 40s is just astronomical for the size of the population of the country. And as safety features were added, and researchers and engineers addressed those issues, and roads became better, and regulations were put into place to sort of save more lives, that we have come to a point where not every road death is solved, but we have, as a society, we've gotten to a point where we are more comfortable with the risk of automobiles, and that the fatalities are at a point where socially we can sort of handle them in such a way as to not be coming apart at the seams. And we certainly haven't got to that point with guns, because every time this happens, we fight and we scream at each other and kind of talk past the issue. And it's not the fact that we don't, or that we need fewer guns. I don't know we'll ever get to that point.
We never need fewer guns.
I feel that that technology, that research into firearms management can make those weapons safer, can make those weapons safer, can make them harder to use in situations like this, so that we're not limiting the sale of a gun. We're making the product such that it is less likely to kill a bunch of people at any given time. That's my jumping off point.
Well, there's a couple of interesting things. You mentioned in your article thumbprint. Mm-hmm. They call it biometric security.
Yep,
that's what they call it. You can't find biometric security anymore on your computers because it's so easy to go around. You really have to search anymore for fingerprint technology that will secure your computer. And that's one of the reasons they did away with it. Now,
I got it on my phone.
Yeah, I get it, but look at it on a computer. You can get an app for that, right, where you stick your thumb on there, and now you can't get on it. But one of the reasons they actually stopped the biometric security from at least from the laptop manufacturers is the fact that it is so easy to circumvent. They
stopped it with Colt was researching about 20 years ago, and they stopped because it didn't work well, and you couldn't rely on the gun to fire every time, even when it was the proper user. What I'm saying, I mentioned examples of things.
Oh, you
bet. What I'm saying is that we have the ability to make these changes.
All right, so let's talk about that. What changes do we need to make to the gun manufacturing system to maybe prevent these things from happening? That's going to be our topic when we return. We want to thank you for tuning in. Without you, we couldn't do what we do. We'll be back right